Well, it's a problem the White House has deemed so dangerous it's now tackling it head-on. Heroin. The White House recently launched a $5 million initiative to combat the use and trafficking of the drug along the East Coast because of its prevalence here.
Just how prevalent? Baltimore is considered the heroin capital of the U.S., and state leaders have taken note. They have launched their own heroin and opioid emergency task force. Among the members, Dr. Michael Finnegan, who's the executive director of Peninsula Mental Health and lead psychologist for Maryland State Police.
You may recognize Dr. Finnegan from his many times here on Delmarva Life, most recently addressing the heroin problem in the state. Now, we learned that many people turn to heroin as a cheaper alternative to opioid painkillers.
That was the case for Sarah McCoy of Salisbury. She and her husband, Jessie, came on the show last month to share their struggles of using heroin for years. The couple told us the drug controlled their lives in every way. Even their kids weren't enough motivation to get them to stop using. As a matter of fact, Sarah says her daughter was born addicted to heroin.
And it definitely takes, the feelings from you, where you are emotionless. You don't care. I didn't care about how he felt. I didn't care about how the kids felt. I didn't care about anybody felt. I just didn't want to feel.
Jessie and Sarah told us their addiction to heroin led them down a path of infidelity, shoplifting, jail time, and hate. Finally, Sarah had had enough. After a stint in rehab, she contacted a friend, got involved in church, and her faith in God did the rest. But it took Jessie a little bit longer to break free from his heroin.
I hated people, I hated my wife, I hated my kid. I was at the point where somebody's gonna die, I'm gonna die, it's gonna be done. And I've had enough. Wow. She, like she said, she reached out to her leader, Trina, started going, so I get dressed just to go. I didn't want to hear the mouth. That's just where I was at. And I would go, and one night we went to a friend's house. The church, 3C, was having a first fruits prayer, I went that night, and I never believed in God. I used to curse God. How can there be a God with what I've been through, And that night, something touched me. He said, come on down. It's time. And after that night, I've never looked back.
And what a transformation. Jessie and Sarah went on to tell us that the relationship with their kids is now strong, and they give all the credit to their faith in God.
What an incredible story. But as they said, it took many years to get them there. Unfortunately, the roads traveled in between can often lead users to make difficult choices, like Mandy Mullins from Salisbury.
When I tried pot, I loved pot, I became a pothead. Then I moved to coke. Then I moved to pills, I became a pillhead. And then I found bigger and better things, and I'm now a heroin addict.
This is where the magic happens. These are my bags. This is from probably like a good month or two at least.
As you can see, addiction of any kind can destroy not only the person using, but an entire family.
Yeah. And as we just pointed out, the heroin epidemic continues to worsen. So how do we, as a community, help diminish this problem? Well, joining us today to tell us are Wycomico County Sheriff Mike Lewis and criminal defense attorney and former drug prosecutor William Hall. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Our pleasure.
Great to be here.
Okay, so as we just saw, Mandy was featured in Investigation Discovery's Breaking Point. What you didn't see is that Mandy prostituted to feed her addiction. Sheriff, how big a problem is prostitution and heroin?
Well, we're on course right now to double the number of arrests that we've had for heroin possession and distribution so far this year than what we had last year. Wow. We have almost double the arrests we had this time last year. Jim, I look at Jessie and I look at Sarah, and first of all, I want to applaud both of them for what they've done to turn their lives around, not only for themselves, but for their beautiful family. That's a heartwarming story right there, but it's something I see and hear every day of my life. And there are many parental support groups that have been implemented throughout the region right now. There's one tomorrow night at 6 p.m. here in Salisbury, parents who have come together to try to get their children off addiction. And it's a lifetime of addiction, and it's a lifetime challenge. And last November, I was one of 5 that were chosen to go down to Bogota, Colombia to examine the heroin epidemic down in Bogota. Yeah. And we were transported deep into the opium fields in Black Hawk helicopters and landed. We actually couldn't land. We actually hovered and had to jump out of our helicopter to go deep into the opium fields. Wow. And this was the first time I'd ever got a close-up look of the opium under in cultivation, being processed in clandestine labs deep into the Amazon mountains and in the valleys along the Amazon River. Okay. And there were hectares and hectares. A hectare is 2.4 acres. But there were hectares of opium growing everywhere. And to see how it's being processed, see how it's coming into the United States, the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region, in the northeastern part of the United States right now, are the #1 destination for all opium leaving Colombia down in South America.
That is amazing. It's hard to believe it's here. And you both were involved in Mandy's intervention.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
It was absolutely amazing to see the transformation that took place with Mandy. When Sheriff Lewis and I came into the case, she was an absolute mess. And the show did a great service by getting her into treatment, and she's doing so much better now. In fact, she's really doing well.
So before the intervention, Mandy had been arrested. She was facing several charges that we know of for sure, everything from drugs to assault charges. She would have faced jail time had she declined rehab. Everything to child endangerment. How much jail time for something like this could she be facing?
Well, she was facing many, many years of incarceration, and that's not at all unusual in these types of cases. One of the things you always see first isn't necessarily the drug charges. You see theft charges, because you have people supporting their addiction, shoplifting, stealing from relatives, stealing from neighbors, and that is very common in these cases. So, I mean, you can face decades of imprisonment.
All right, Sheriff Lewis, during the intervention, you stood in the hallway and was not present in the room when Mandy arrived. Why is that?
Well, I didn't want to intimidate her, #1, but we had made it very clear, if in fact she decided to withdraw from the process and not go to treatment, we were prepared to arrest her and charge her. As Will said moments ago, the overwhelming majority of our cases that we're facing today, theft, burglaries, B&Es, home invasions, 87% of all of our crime is directly linked to drug addiction. The overwhelming majority of moms and dads whose homes are broken into during the day, grandparents' homes who are broken into during the day, it's being done by their children and their grandchildren. And it's horrible, because most of the time they don't want to prosecute their kids. They just want their jewelry back, they want their valuables back, and we have to go to the pawn shops and try to locate these items. Most of our shoplifting, almost all of our shoplifting cases, they're stealing property and merchandise from retailers here in Wycomico County solely to sell it to satisfy their heroin addiction.
Now, you both get involved in Breaking Point.
Absolutely.
How did that happen?
Yes. Well, I received a call at the office one day from the producers of the show, and they explained to me the situation that they had. And I felt that it was really important not just to see me as a criminal defense attorney, but also to bring in law enforcement, especially in that situation where you have somebody that is seeking help for their issues.
Trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, that they should see the whole picture.
So you used to be a drug prosecutor, now you're a defense attorney.
Correct.
Why? Was it just a direction to go that you could help out some more?
Well, you know, my role as a defense attorney is to try to help the person, #1, avoid incarceration, but also to make sure that they don't come back to court for their problems. And so my background as a prosecutor, I was focused just from the law enforcement point of view, but now as the defense attorney, you kind of wear a couple of different hats and trying to help the client, you know, get that help, because obviously if Mandy had not received that help, you know, terrible things would have happened to her.
And she did receive that help, and she went to the center down in Florida. She was eventually released. How's she doing today?
She's doing great, and she wanted me to pass that along to the audience, that she's doing very well. She's been clean. She's living her life the way she wants to now, and she's working, and she's now a productive member of society.
That's
so
awesome.
It's a great story with a happy ending.
That's a great story with a happy ending, but there are several repeat offenders too, aren't there?
Absolutely. The recidivism rate is very, very high. I've said it many times. We cannot arrest ourselves out of this problem, and we know that. So when Will contacted me and asked me to be part of the show, to help this girl get on track. Oftentimes, they will not voluntarily go into treatment programs. They will not do it. So oftentimes, we have to mandate that, and that's solely by arresting them, charging them with what we already have. Right. And there are many, many things we could charge them with. We don't want to do that, but it's the only time oftentimes we can get them into the proper treatment programs that they need, that oftentimes they don't desire, their families desire it, but we get them to the treatment programs. And this is a great transformation with Mandy Mullins. And we don't see it all the time, but thank God this was a success story.
Yeah.
Sheriff Lewis, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot on the show is Narcan. I mean, how it can save a heroin addict's life. Are your officers trained to administer Narcan?
They are trained, they are using it, and we have saved lives already. We just saved a life last week, as a matter of fact, with Narcan, and it's a synthetic drug that counteracts the heroin or the opium that's been ingested. And but it's a synthetic drug, and a lot of police departments are now using it. In the last 6 days, we've had 7 heroin overdoses. Wow. In the last 6 days in Wicomico County alone.
In the last 6 days,
in the last 6
7 heroin overdoses.
So in the last 6 days.
This.
Sir?
We've talked a lot about Mandy, and what a wonderful story that is. What would you tell someone in Mandy's situation?
There's hope. Mandy, and look at Jessie and Sarah McCoy. There are success stories out there. I have friends of mine that have hit rock bottom with addiction that are now very successful businessmen and women here in Wicomico County. I got to be honest with you, the recidivism rate is so high, but there are success stories out there.
You can get out.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Our pleasure.
So much.
This afternoon.
All right, and if you would like to read more about Mandy's story or for more information on how you or a loved one can get help with addiction, go to WVOC.com, click on our picture at the top of the page. Well, another problem that plagues our streets, homelessness. Could you imagine not having a home where you sleep, eat, and wash up? Up next on Delmarva Life, how one woman has made it her mission to help the homeless. See how it's making a difference in their lives.
You can make a difference, too, in the lives of children who need clean clothes to go back to school. We're going to tell you how and learn how it gives those little ones so much more than just a new outfit. Delmarva Life. We'll be right back.